Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be looking at how to create nav bars, and this is the basis of making a multi-page website, which is going to be your project. But this in itself is a project. Now you don't have to do everything I'm showing you. In fact, I only recommend you to try to recreate the nav bar. You don't have to make this a full-on project. Now I'm going to be showing you a nav bar in this project and a nav bar in the project video itself. There are two different types of nav bars, so you can choose which one you want to use in your online portfolio or other later projects. So let's start. First, we need to create a header, of course. So div class equals header. Oh yeah, and then while I'm creating the framework for this, the topic of this website is going to be Eid ul-Fitr, which is basically a celebration for Muslims after a long month of fast. So fasting is basically where we don't eat for like 16 hours or like 20 hours, and then we break our fast at like 8 o'clock in the night, and it's just a religious thing. And then after we're done with that month, we celebrate, and that celebration is actually tomorrow. So that's why I decided to make this topic based on this lesson. So without further ado, let's get started. Inside the header, we're going to have our nav bar actually. Sometimes you don't, sometimes you have it outside your header, but this type of nav bar will be inside. I'm going to call it nav bar like that. And then inside the nav bar, so this is going to be a nav bar, right? Inside, we're going to have a tags. And remember, these tags link us to different parts of our web page. And let's see, I want photos, right? I want to show them photos of this festival. And you can just copy paste. Let's have 3. You always have to have one that's the home page, right? So home. And then you can add like a history, like the history of how this festival started or something like that, right? And then let's name them here. Cool. Now this is our nav bar. If you open up this page, you can see that we have, it's basically a list of links. Later on, I'll show you how to make this look much nicer. Now the second thing we want to do, and this is again another type of header. So we're going to create a full-on header. So this basically means we're going to create an image that spans the length of this entire page. And that's what a lot of professional websites actually do. So div class equals header text. Okay, so we have a nav bar and then we have the actual text. And then inside we can add our h1 in Twitter, and then we can add our h3, which is like the feast after the fast. Okay, so that looks good. That's going to be our header, and that's all I'm going to teach you here. This stuff right here is, I'll show you that later on. So I'm going to be going to the style now, and the way I'm going to do the styling is I'm not actually going to type everything out. I'm going to paste like each chunk block by block, kind of like project videos, because I have a lot to cover. So let's get on to the style. Okay, so the first thing that we've done is we've created some of the styling for the header, the like overarching div, this big div right here, right? We set its width to 100%. We've set its height to 900 pixels. Now that's pretty huge. It'll span the entire page. Background size cover, so it takes the entire image, takes up the entire page. Background position center, you know that already. And then background image, I used this mosque image. It's a 4K image. If you go here and if you reload the page, it looks kind of nice. Now we have the header text. So we basically added a margin top. Okay, so let's take a look at what it looks like right now. So we've added a margin top to it, right? and we pushed it down. That's what the margin top does. It pushes it down to the center. We added like a gray background because if we don't have this gray background, then what it'll do is it'll kind of blend in with the background and it won't look good. So we need some sort of contrast. And so I used a transparent gray background. And then let's add the styling for the text itself because it looks kind of small and I'd rather have it to be white than black. And here it is, the header text, H1 and H3. Basically, I just, change the font size. Oh, and here's a cool thing you can do if you can actually space out the letters. So right now you can see that it's spaced out. If I make this like 15, you can space things out like this. And sometimes it's good if you feel like you're not taking up the entire width of the page. I mean, this kind of looks ugly right here, so I recommend don't do it above 10. 5 in my opinion looks fine. And then the subtitle as well. So I'm not really focusing too much on the styling right now, like of the coloring and stuff like that. I want to focus on the styling of the navbar, which we'll get into right now. So this is another way to do a header, right? Full on scale, and then at the bottom you'll have all your stuff, and I'll show you how that'll look like. But let's get on to the header. The navbar. Okay, here it is, the navbar. So the navbar itself is a div. Okay, let's think about the HTML, the structure of it, right? We have a div called navbar. Inside there are 3 elements, which are A tags. Okay, so if you go here, we see that the navbar itself is a width of 100%, so it spans the entire page, and we made the background color gray. Okay, then let's just reload the page so I can show you how it looks like. Okay, we can hover over it, change the color, which is pretty cool. Again, this is not the most appealing of navbars, but I do want you to experiment with how to make a better navbar than I did. This is a very basic one. So, like I said, we've changed the width, and then for the A tag inside of the navbar, right, we did text decoration none because if we didn't do this, A tags are automatically going to have an underline, right? So we do text decoration none to make sure that there is no underline. They're automatically going to be blue too. Like whenever you paste like a www link, remember it's like underline and blue. We don't want that. So we're also going to change the color to white, change the font size, add padding, and then display inline. This is all stuff that you know. Now, something that you might not know is the A hover, which is basically what happens when I hover over the link. Another cool thing you can do is A visited. So this basically is the color, or it doesn't have to be color, right? You can also change the and I'll teach you how to do this better later on. But see, we can add like a font size. We can change the font size. So when we hover over it, see how the font size changes to be smaller? We can do stuff like that as well. And A visited is basically when we click on the link and we come back to this page, what's the difference between a visited link and a normal link? So these are called pseudo tags, and the only one you really need to know is A hover, because that's where the cool, hover effect comes in. Okay, so this looks like a good website, but I haven't shown you everything yet. We have to learn how to actually go to new pages. Okay, so this is where the adding files comes in. We're going to create a new file and we're going to call it photos.html, right? And then another one called history.html, like this. Okay, make sure you have the .html because that indicates that it's a HTML file, right? And then it's empty, right? So what you can do is you can copy paste all of this, right, into here. Okay, and now when we reload the page and we go to photos, it looks the same, but let's change the title, right? Let's change it to photos. And if we go to home, did I change something? Photos, right here, right here. This is supposed to be index.html, and I'll change that here as well. So index.html, this is the home page. When you click on home, it takes us to either. When you go to photos, it takes us to photos. When you go to history, it takes the title changes to history. Now let's say I want a different styling, right? I want a completely different styling for history. I don't want this regular style.css. Then what we do up here is we change the style name to history.css. Make a new file, history.css. And basically the history.html is linked to the history.css. If you go to index.html, we can see how the style tag is linked. The index.html is linked to the style.css. Replit automatically does this for you, but when you create a new HTML file, you have to do this yourself. Okay, so if we go to the history page, we see that there's literally no styling because we haven't added anything. So let's go back to home. Okay, now this is not the only way you can make web pages. You do not need to make a multi-page website. Here's another way you can do it. Right here we have our section, so let me uncomment this out and let's see what it looks like. Or am I at home? Oh no, I'm at photos. So this is what your sections would look like. You probably center this. There'd be like divs here, images, text, content, right? But let's say I didn't want to go to a new page. I just, like when I click photos, I just go directly to the photos, right? Like it scrolls me down to the photos. Well, what you can do is, you see how I have an ID here of history and photos. You can actually link it to the ID itself. So you can do hashtag photos, hashtag history. And usually if you're doing something like this where there's no other pages, you won't have a home page. So let's reload the page. Let's see what happens. Takes us to photos. Nice. Takes us to history. This is pretty cool. This allows you to create a huge web page. Like let's say you have a huge web page, right? Like scrolls down like 100 like lines, but you only have one page, right? But you have a very long page. This navbar allows you to navigate to different parts of this one page by using IDs. Okay. Now the last thing I want to show you is how you can make the navbar scroll along while we're scrolling down with the page. And this is pretty cool. So let's go to the navbar, right? The first thing we need to do is do position fixed. This makes it so that when we're scrolling down the page, right, the navbar stays in the same spot. Okay? But then we have a problem. Let's look at it. Yeah, that does not look appealing. Right? So what we gotta do is we also have to do z index 1. Okay, I guess not. Okay, so after a while I found the error per se. It was just that I had to use position absolute right here. But this is basically how you can make a nice scroll bar, right? See, the problem was the white box was showing above because I had margin top 20%, which actually made a margin top 20% like above this image itself. But if I made the header text position absolute, that fixed everything. So if you have like a very long page, you should use this type of navbar. But if you want to split your pages, if you want to split your website into multiple pages, then use the navbar that I showed you in the beginning. That's it for this video. I hope to see you later on when we do our project.